Welcome to the Private Practice with Soul podcast. My name is Dr. Storme, and I help private practice owners align their business back with their soul's calling, with their big vision and with their soul's purpose. Unlike other private practice coaches, I've traveled the world in search of spiritual resources, spiritual tools, education and information so that you can have the transformation that your soul desires and needs so that you can up-level your business. How much fun is this? I love it so much. Guys, if you're not already a member of the Private Practice Monthly Mentorship Group, please check out the show notes. I would love for you to be there. In the meantime, thank you so much for pushing play today. Let's begin. Guys, hi, welcome to another episode of the Private Practice with Soul podcast. I am super duper pleased that you're here. I think I said super duper last time, didn't I? I don't know where this is coming from. Let's just say I'm really excited that you're here. Today we're going to be talking about choosing the right model for your private practice. And so I thought I would do a little bit of a compare and contrast because it can be a bit confusing, can't it, when you're first starting out in your private practice or when you've been in it for a little while and you're looking at making a change. Maybe someone's approached you and they want to be a partner and things like that. So I thought we'd go over that today. However, there is a little bit of a caveat to this. And of course, I absolutely believe wholeheartedly that the success that you experience in your private practice is an inside job first, right? Your business success is going to come from the inside out, meaning your mindset and your beliefs, your vision and your values. So if you have not done the alignment work that was discussed in previous episodes, I would absolutely recommend that you go back and do that so that all of this will make sense to you, okay? So I guess, the first thing that comes to mind is a lot of private practice owners tend to, when they start in private practice, go into it as a sole trader. Okay, so a sole trader simply means somebody that's practicing under their own name, all right, just as an individual. So if I was a sole trader, which I did used to be, my business name would just be Storme, right? That's it. And, the thing about being a sole trader is, of course, you have all the flexibility in the world for how you want to practice because you're not answerable or accountable to anybody but yourself, all right? So that's like one of the huge benefits. And of course, it's not really complicated to get set up. There's not a whole heap to do, is there? You've kind of already got your business name. You get to choose how you want to work. So you can either work from, I don't know, maybe you have space at home and you have a room there at home that you want to work from. You can do that. That's fine. Maybe you want to go and sublet a room at another practice. You can do that. That's fine. Or maybe you have a practice and you want to sublet to somebody else. You can do that as well. That's all fine. Okay. You have ownership over all of your assets. So that's great. Nobody's sharing them with you, and you have like all your privacy. So unlike when you're a company, you don't have so much privacy because some of your details are put on a register that certain companies can access. But when you're a sole trader, you're considered like a private entity, and so your private details are kept private. So that's nice too, especially considering the demographic that we're working with. We're working in mental health, right? So it's nice to have some privacy around that. So it's just really easy. It's an easy model to start out in. And it allows you to establish some roots before you make any decisions about what you'd rather do with a private practice down the track. However, it's not without its sort of challenges. And some of those challenges are that you are fully responsible for everything that happens in the practice. So it all comes back down to you, okay? There's nobody sharing that responsibility for you, okay? The other thing too is that your assets are going to be vulnerable. So if anything happens, then, things like if you have a home or a holiday home or your car or things like that, they could be vulnerable. So you want to make sure that you've got super good insurance around all of that sort of stuff. The other thing sometimes around working as a sole trader, especially if you're working by yourself and you're not at a shared location, is that it can be really isolating. If you don't have bodies around you other than clients, if you don't have bodies around you, it can be really isolating. That can be a problem for some people, because there are some people that really do value the water cooler conversations and the lunchroom debriefing and things like that, and the sort of ad hoc supervision that can happen when you're in a setting where there are other professionals working around you. So if you're somebody who really needs that, being a sole trader might still be an option for you, but you'd want to look at where you're operating from. You might just want to choose to go rent a room somewhere that's got other bodies in it, okay, with other people doing things there too. It's also going to potentially, depending on the type of work that you want to do, restrict you in terms of being able to deliver that. So sometimes if you want to apply for a tender, they might be requiring that you have a company that has X amount of employees that's turning over this much money, etc. So it could be limiting for you depending on what you want to do with the practice. So that's a sole trader, and that's a really common way for psychologists, counselors, coaches, social workers, psychologists, I think I'm repeating myself now, to start, okay? The other really common way to start, and I'm not so sure about this with social work, but definitely with psychology, it happens a lot, is being an associate. Okay, so you have something that's called an associate agreement, and a really common model for this is when you have psychologists working in GP clinics, like at those huge bulk billing medical clinics where there's like 27 doctors and thousands of patients coming through every day. You'll see a psychologist sort of buzzing in and out of a room there. She or he are probably on what's called an associate agreement. So an associate agreement is where you're still running your own business, but you're operating within a bigger practice and you're contributing money. And usually in this type of model, it's a percentage. And it's usually because a lot of psychologists at the moment in those bulk billing clinics are required to bulk bill as part of their agreement. So it's not much money that they're turning over usually. They need to see a high volume of clients to turn over money that might meet their goals or their expectations, but that's another story. But usually the practice would retain around 30%. And the 30% goes towards having reception there, shared resources like a kitchen area where there's a fridge and a microwave and tea, coffee, milk and a jar of cookies, where there's a reception area where people can actually go and sit down, where there's a printer, where there's a desk and a chair, where there's heating and cooling, where there's natural light, things like that. So in an associate agreement, usually that money that you're paying is going towards supporting, communal resources, shared resources within that practice, okay? And that's really, 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 really great, because if you're just operating as a sole trader from your own premises or from your own home, you might not have access to a printer and all the equipment and someone to do high caps and someone to answer the phone for you and book people in and reschedule and cancel and to process. You're going to be doing all of that yourself, probably. So that's the advantage to going and working somewhere like this. And it doesn't have to be GP super clinic. It might just be, working at a practice that's got a team of psychologists and social workers and physios and OTs and speak. You know what I mean? It's that type of model, and you're contributing a percentage in exchange for having the benefits of all of those shared resources. Okay, it just takes pressure off you as a business owner. So it's really great like that. It's usually just a contract that you sign. You should always get that contract looked at before you sign anything, because you want to make sure that you've got your escape clause if things go pear-shaped and you want to get out. You don't want to be stuck there for 6 months. You want to have a look at things like, restriction of trade. That's a really big one, especially if you're an associate at a private practice. Where there's other psychologists, if the principals or the partners or the directors of that private practice have put a restriction clause in that contract, you want to make sure that you agree to it before you sign it. So restriction clauses are a bit sticky and you do need to get legal advice, but sometimes they can say things like, well, for a period of time, let's say 6 months after you leave ABC Psychology, you're not allowed to, work within a 15-kilometre radius of the practice, or you can't work with our top 10 referrers, and it will have a list of the top 10 referrers. You can't accept any referrals from them. Or it might say something like that. So some of them can be a bit dodgy. So, I shouldn't say that. I think some of them can be questionable. And so it's always a good idea for you to have a look at that restriction of trade and just check that it's, cogent and that it makes sense and that you are able to comply with it should things happen and you need to leave for whatever reason, or you're terminated for whatever reason. Okay, usually an associate contract will run for around 12 months and then it will be renewed. Okay, and yeah, they're great because they're super cost efficient for you. Like, you just get access to so much more stuff than if you were a sole trader in your own sort of private practice setup there. The main challenge is to just check the conditions of your agreement before you sign to it. And then the last one I wanted to talk about today that some of you were asking me about was partnerships. Now, I think partnerships are, a good idea, but I think you need to be mindful of them. Think about, to use an analogy, think about partnership, like with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a significant other, right? It always starts off really great, right? But then what happens? Then you start to see little sides of each other that you didn't know were there, or that you don't really like, or you wish they weren't there. Maybe things like this can happen with a business partnership as well. You might both go into it with the best of intention, but after the honeymoon period phases out or wears off and your true colours are revealed, you might actually find you don't particularly like this person that you're now in a partnership with, or that you have very different views of where you want the practice to go. Maybe have different views over the type of team that you want on board. Maybe she wants a naturopath and you're saying, no, I don't want a naturopath. I want to stick with, psychologists. Or maybe they're saying, oh, well, I really want to have a specialization area of focus around trauma. And maybe you're saying, well, I don't want to limit myself and I think we should be open to everything. And so all these little things can pop up, and that can make it really, really hard. So I would just make sure that you know the person that you're going to be having a partnership with, and that you have a really a good meeting or series of meetings before you sign anything locking you into a partnership. Because sometimes it can be, more trouble than it's worth. Other times, if you're both on the same page, you're both in agreement and you share the same vision, that's amazing. You can do amazing things together. The other thing to be mindful of is when you're in a partnership, you want to make sure that you're clear from the outset about the proportions, okay? So by proportions, I mean you want to be clear from the outset about who's paying how much for what, who's investing how much for what, who's receiving how much for what's the remuneration going to be for each person, is the remuneration going to be in proportion to the contribution that they're making? Like, how's that all going to work? Some people say, well, let's just make it easy and we're just going to go 50-50. But the problem with that is that once the honeymoon period is over and you're 6 or 12 months into the partnership, sometimes we find one person feels like they're doing all the work or most of the work and the other one's not, but the other one's still getting 50%. And so then what happens is, some resentment starts to creep in and people avoid conflict. So they sit on things and they don't address things, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And we either have a big blow up, or somebody says, I'm done, I'm out, can't do it anymore, and they dissolve the partnership. The other thing to be mindful of is when situations happen, like perhaps one of the partners is going through some personal stuff and maybe they can't meet their financial responsibilities. So maybe you're both saying, well, we're going to split the rent this month 50-50. But if the other person's saying, well, I can't do that because, I've got all these other expenses going on, I just can't do it at the moment. Well, that means that the other person's going to have to cover that expense and pay for that expense. So you need to make sure that you've got money put aside in case the other person isn't able to meet their financial obligations and responsibilities to the partnership. And how do you feel about that? How do you feel about maybe yourself being in a position, let's say something happens to you, maybe somebody gets sick and, you deplete some of your savings and hard-earned cash on things like treatment and recovery and all that sort of stuff. And then when it comes time to pay the rent, you don't have it. How do you feel about, the other person now having to step up and cover you for the rent? So thinking about these types of things is really important before you start a partnership with anybody, okay? The other thing too is when you have a partnership, your personal assets can often be vulnerable and exposed when the partnership can't pay its debts. So again, this is something that you want to have a look at with your lawyer. You want to get a really good contract in place, and you want to make sure that you've got really good insurance in place to, protect the business and to protect both of you, or all of you, but both of you, in case something happens, So they're the three different types. Of course, there's more than that. There's like franchises and consortiums and things like that. But I've just gone with the ones that I get the most questions about today. But I think, I'm not a lawyer, obviously. I'm a private practice coach, and my job is to help you find what's going to work best for you, right? And only you know that, and only you can make that decision. But and I can't tell you what to do, but what I can suggest you do is really start from that place of, if I were running my dream private practice in total alignment with my vision, values and purpose, what would be going on? Right? Do you see yourself with somebody else? Do you see yourself at a super clinic? Do you see yourself in your own room? Do you see yourself subletting at somebody else's practice? Really journal it out and see what comes up for you before you make a decision. Okay? Because you always want to be operating from a place of total alignment. Okay? That's where the magic is. And that's where your happiness is going to be, and that's where your success is going to be in your business. I hope that this helps you gain some clarity. The other thing that I would suggest too is that if anybody ever asks you to sign something and you're not sure and you're not confident, I would absolutely encourage you to please take it to a lawyer, get them to look over it, get some feedback or some guidance or some input, okay? And there are lots of places that we can recommend for that. The other option is you can always ring your insurer and see if they have a service available whereby they might be able to give you some guidance about, any contracts or documentation before you sign it too. All right. So I hope that this brought you some clarity. If you're in private practice and you're thinking about making a change, or maybe you're thinking about starting a private practice, come and join our community. I think you're really going to love it there. It's called the Private Practice Monthly Mentorship. And it's full of, it's all women at the moment. I didn't design it like that. It's just how it's happened. But it's all women at the moment, and they're all at different stages of their private practice. And they're creating them in alignment, or they're in the process of bringing existing practices into alignment with their vision and purpose. Helping people create a soul-led business is just, it's so rewarding. I love it so much. I hope that this has helped you. You can check out the show notes. My email address is in there. So if you don't want to join a group, that's fine. But send me an email if you have some questions, because I'm here to help. Or we can jump on a call if you like. I'm happy to. Sometimes speaking to somebody is a bit easier than going back and forth over email, isn't it? So I'm also happy to do that. And if you'd like to set up a call, you're most welcome to do so. Just send me an email and I can send you some information on how to do that. And also I've put in there a private practice checklist for you in the show notes. You can download your copy of that if you haven't got it already. So I hope these things helped you. If they did, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I'd be so appreciative of that. It will help me reach more people. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys. Have a beautiful day. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Private Practice with Soul podcast today. If you're looking for clarity, if you need help with branding, your processes, and bringing everything into alignment with your soul's purpose for your private practice, head to the show notes and click the link for more information about the Private Practice Monthly Mentorship Group. You are going to love it. I can't wait to see you in there. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.